Today we're making my creamy white bean and kale soup. It is really healthy, but surprisingly creamy and packed with so much flavor. It's easy enough to whip up on a weeknight, but you can also make a big batch on Sunday and enjoy it throughout the week. We'll start by prepping our aromatics. We've got a sweet onion, 3 ribs of celery, 3 carrots, and garlic. Sweet onions have a little bit more natural sugar in them than regular yellow onions. So they're great raw in salads, or if you want to caramelize them, or where you just want a slightly subtle sweet flavor. If you don't have a sweet onion, if all you have is a yellow onion at home, that's totally fine. It works just as well. This is a really pungent, onion. Let's clear some of this off. And where's my trash bowl? Trash bowl? The garbage in our new kitchen is way over there, so this is super useful to have right here, so I don't have to keep walking back and forth. By the way, this is our new house. We just moved in a few days ago, and it looks pretty tidy here because I have put all the boxes behind the kitchen. So once we're fully moved in and everything's furnished, I will give you a house tour, but in the meantime, welcome to my new kitchen. For the carrots, cut them in half and then take the heavier part of the carrot and cut that into quarters and then dice it up. For the bottom half, the skinnier part, you can just cut it in half and dice that up. We've also got 3 ribs of celery. If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't love celery. It's not my favorite, but when you cook it down with onions and salt and carrots, it's gonna make a great base for the soup. We're gonna mince up 6 cloves. Oh, it's a tough one. 6 cloves of garlic. There it is, garlic. And if that sounds like a lot of garlic, it's because it is. It is a lot of garlic, but garlic is delicious. I love it, and it's gonna add a lot of flavor to this soup, and it works really well with all the other ingredients. A few other ingredients for this soup, we've got some cannellini beans, which are white kidney beans. I love using them in this soup because they are so creamy in texture, almost fluffy. They have a nice mild but subtle nutty taste. Because of their creamy texture, they're going to naturally thicken this soup in a way that other beans don't do as well. And because it's a weeknight soup, I'm just using canned cannellini beans that I've rinsed and drained. But if you want to take the soup over the top, you can cook your own dried beans from scratch and a little bit of vegetable broth or water with some aromatics like onions or bay leaves, and it'll enhance the flavor of the soup even more. And our second ingredient that's going to bring creaminess to the soup is a potato. This is a Yukon Gold potato. You're going to peel it and dice it, and when you cook potatoes down, they're going to act as a natural thickening agent for the soup. My first technique for leveling up your soups with lots of flavor is to make a bouquet garnis. A fancy French word, but it's really simple. It's just a bundle of herbs tied together. You can use kitchen twine, which costs like $2 at a hardware store, and you add it to soups or stocks or braises or casseroles to infuse a lot of flavor. Today I'm using a sprig of rosemary, a sprig of fresh sage, and 2 bay leaves. If you're worried about buying fresh herbs because you think you won't be able to get through all of them before they go bad, there are many ways you can preserve them or upcycle them, and I'm going to show you one of my favorite ways to do that. If you have leftover tough herbs like rosemary and sage, or thyme and oregano, you can freeze them in olive oil. For rosemary, remove the individual needles from the stem and roughly chop the leaves up. And for sage, I like to roll the leaves together and then chiffonade them. Then measure out the desired amount of herbs into a clean ice cube tray. You can use a teaspoon or tablespoon measure so you know exactly how many herbs there are in each cube, or you can just eyeball it. I prefer my herbs chopped up a little bit, but you can even add unchopped herbs to the ice cube trays if you prefer. Pour in some olive oil to submerge the herbs, or if you prefer, you can do this with melted vegan butter too. And if you're planning to use these herb cubes for high heat cooking, you can use an oil with a higher smoke point, such as avocado oil. Pop the ice cube tray in the freezer. When you're ready to cook, just drop one of these herby olive oil cubes in a hot pan. It's going to bring a lot of flavor to your dishes, whether you're toasting some nuts or making a sauce or a veggie saute or heating up pasta. And best of all, now you don't have to worry about wasting any leftover herbs. All right, let's get the soup started. We're gonna heat up a large soup pot or Dutch oven with some olive oil over medium-high heat. Once the pot is hot, add the diced onions, carrots, and celery. I'm gonna season the vegetables with a little bit of salt, as my teenage idol, Barefoot Contessa, obviously, who else, taught me a long time ago. You want to layer in seasoning as you go at every stage of cooking so that your food tastes well seasoned and balanced instead of bland or too salty. We'll cook these down until the vegetables start to soften and the onions start to just brown, about 6 to 8 minutes. Once the vegetables have softened and have some color on them, add in the minced garlic and a half teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes and stir frequently for about 1 to 2 minutes. The red pepper flakes are going to give a slight kick to the soup, but it's not going to be spicy. While the vegetables are sauteing, we're going to do our last step, which is to chop up some canned artichoke hearts. They're going to add a little more body and meatiness to the soup, but they are totally optional. Now we're going to deglaze the pot by pouring in 3.5 to 4 cups of vegetable broth, kind of depending on how thick you want the soup to be. And make sure you really scrape up the brown bits that are stuck to the bottom of the pot. That's where a lot of flavor lives, so you want to get those in there too. Now we'll add the cannellini beans along with the potatoes, the chopped artichoke hearts, and season with some kosher salt as well as the black pepper. And finally, we'll take that bouquet garnis and submerge it under the liquid. Bring the soup to a boil, and once it's boiling, reduce the heat and cover the pan to maintain a simmer for about 15 minutes or until the potatoes are tender. While the soup is simmering, we'll prepare our second flavor booster for the soup, which is a gremolata. Again, another fancy sounding word, but it is, again, very simple. A traditional gremolata is made with 3 ingredients. It's an Italian herby condiment. We've got chopped parsley, garlic, and lemon zest, and you basically just chop those all together very finely. My version also has a little bit of basil for that citrusy anisey taste, as well as some coarse sea salt. So we'll finally chop 1 cup of flat leaf parsley along with 1/2 cup of fresh basil leaves, and then add 3 large garlic cloves. You can use a microplane or grater or just finely chop them up with a knife, and then we'll zest 2 small lemons directly on top of everything. A gremolata is one of my go-to flavor boosters that you can sprinkle on all kinds of soups to give it a bright finish, but it's also great on toasted bread, grilled or roasted vegetables, or your favorite protein. Then finally mince everything together and finally sprinkle some coarse or flaky sea salt on top. We'll sprinkle the gremolata on top of the soup before serving, so it's going to add a lot of zing to an otherwise creamy, hearty soup. The potatoes are tender, and now I'm just going to remove that bouquet garnis. The twine makes it easy to remove it all at once instead of the herbs floating everywhere throughout the soup. And now it's time to introduce our third way of making this soup really creamy but still healthy. We're going to blend half of this soup. You can use a stand blender, or I'm going to use an immersion blender today to keep this as a kind of one pot easy meal, and just blend up about half of the soup. That will naturally thicken the soup. Or if you do it in a stand blender, just return the blended part back to the soup. And once you stir the pureed part into the rest of the soup, you can see it naturally thickens it up. It makes it creamy without having to use any extra ingredients like a coconut milk or cashews or anything like that. After we blend the soup, we're going to add in some chopped kale. I'm just removing the tough stem, is it called the stem? The rib, the tough rib in the middle. But if you don't mind it, you can just leave it in. And this is a great technique to get a lot of greens into your diet without feeling like you're eating a lot of salad. Just add in some greens during the last 3 to 5 minutes of cooking a soup or a stew or anything hearty like that, and you won't really even notice it's there, but you'll be getting in a lot of vitamins and nutrients. I prefer to use lacinato kale because it's less tough than curly kale. Now we're gonna add our chopped kale to the soup, and we'll let this simmer for just 3 to 5 minutes until the kale is tender but still bright green. All right, the soup is done at this point. Give it a taste. Season with just a little bit of salt because there's some salt in the gremolata, and some black pepper. If you're planning to eat the soup today or maybe tomorrow, you can add the gremolata now, but if you want to freeze the soup, check out the blog post, which is linked in the description box below, for tips on how to freeze this soup. And my final tip for infusing extra flavor into this soup is drizzling some olive oil on top before serving. This is the time to use that good quality extra virgin olive oil with the fruity undertones. Since this soup is relatively low in fat, the extra virgin olive oil at the end is going to add some nice richness as well as a subtle texture. Ooh, it's hearty and creamy, but still really fresh and bright and lemony. Got a little bit of kick from the red pepper flakes. I think you'll love it. You can find the recipe as always on my blog, which is linked below. And if you're interested in more hearty yet healthy comfort food, I've got some more videos right here.